You're watching Beyond Markets. Welcome, Mr. Awuni. Many thanks for joining us. On today's show, we'll discuss United States plans to deepen ties with Africa. As always, you can join the conversation with the hashtag Beyond Markets, and you can follow my Twitter handle too at Esther O. Awuni. Now, the United States Overseas Private Investment Corporation, OPIC, has been responsible for facilitating expansion of American businesses in emerging markets since 1971. Worku Gachou, Managing Director for Africa at OPIC, joins me to discuss its plans to deepen ties with the continent. Worku, thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time out to join us today.
It's great to be here in Lagos. Thanks so much.
Let's start with why you're here in Lagos,
Yeah.
the USA Fair 2019. Talk to us about who you've met so far. I know you've had meetings with some financial institutions. Bring us up to speed on how those meetings have progressed.
Of course, great. So so I'm in town for the USA Fair, which was organized by the U.S. Embassy here in Nigeria. And what's great about the fair is that it brings together U.S. businesses and Nigerian businesses and businesses throughout the region, and ensuring that discussions and opportunities are shared between both parties. So, we had representatives, senior representatives from the Nigerian government.
Okay.
We've had people from the Nigerian the Investment Promotion Council as well. And then a number of business leaders from various sectors, including real estate, technology, agriculture, and financial services as well. So it's a great opportunity with everyone descending into Lagos to help further and further cultivate business opportunities.
Well, in speaking to these businessmen, these businesses, financial institutions, what's been the feedback in terms of what the U.S. is offering? I mean, I know that it's all, at the end of the day, trying to deepen trade ties. I know that you did come with a number of American businesses too, across different sectors. But in terms of what the feedback has been so far, what can you tell us?
I think the feedback is just general excitement. I think people recognize that there's strong investment needs here in Nigeria and the continent writ large, but also the opportunity, right? I mean, just in Lagos, you can feel the buzz of commercial activity throughout the day, and so I think people are recognizing that to be active, to be successful on the continent, you have to be present, and you have to have those discussions, but then also look to deepen and further the relationship.
Now, for these companies that have come, how do they perceive the level of risk? I mean, we look at Nigeria. I mean, I know essentially it's high risk, high return in some cases, but you have to look at the risk and weigh it against. Okay, I mean, my investment and my assets, and investment is going to be safe, etc. But how do they perceive that risk?
Well, essentially, there's both real risk and perceived risk, and I think some of the real risks revolve around some of the regulatory environment issues. But I think there's also some perceived risk just from the way that some of the news kind of portray Africa, right? I mean, there's still this outdated mindset, and so I think these type of trips are important because you understand how to navigate some of the real risks, but then you also debunk some of the perceived risks as well.
Okay, let's move on to OPIC now. The Overseas Private Investment Corporation has been in operation since 1971. That's quite a while.
50 years, yeah.
50 years, and it essentially helps American businesses, invest in emerging markets, basically, right? One of it.
Yeah. So what we do is we mobilize private sector capital to really have a transformational impact in emerging markets, and so we do that by a range of financial products that we provide to our clients, including debt financing, political risk insurance, and we support private equity funds. What's exciting about OPEC is, Africa is our largest regional exposure. Currently, we have about $6.5 billion, and are actively looking to grow our pipeline of deals here.
Talk to us about those deals. I mean, what sectors would you say you're most active in, and in terms of perhaps return on investment, where have you seen the most traction?
So, we operate in a range of sectors: agriculture, manufacturing, transportation, energy. One of the sectors that excites me a lot right now is the ICT space, information communications technology. I think there is a real demand and a real hunger here on the continent to really utilize data access and data connectivity to help the markets grow. It empowers individuals. It supports communities. So looking at ways to increase data access and data connectivity.
I was going to go there because infrastructure for that is still it's still a concern here. It's key, but it's still a concern. Many African countries, in terms of broadband penetration, is still very low. Even Nigeria. Even the leaders, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa. But in terms of the real need, those who are still lagging, Nigeria will still fall in that bracket. But in terms of the opportunity to leapfrog, is that part of what excites you? We're talking ICT, and you don't have to. There's always that opportunity. So.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think people appreciate kind of what having broadband and data access does from education and skills training, from health. There's many kind of tangential benefits, and so an example of our investment in this type of sector is we committed $130 million to support AfriCell, which is a Sierra Leonean Gambian mobile network operator. And that investment went to revitalize some existing infrastructure, but then also expand infrastructure to ensure that customers in those markets can have reliable, affordable data access and mobile connectivity.
What about Nigeria? The size of investments over the years, recently?
So Nigeria, Nigeria is actually one of our largest country exposures. We have nearly $1 billion worth of investments throughout Nigeria. In the power sector, we've been quite active, also in transport and logistics, and then, exciting, part of my time here has been spent on exploring additional opportunities. So I've had a number of meetings with investors in the real estate space, in agriculture, and financial services.
And what's been your, the thinking so far? You've spoken to them, you've looked at these sectors. What would you say is, for you, what would be a good feedback in terms of what you've seen, maybe versus what you perceive, but basically what you've seen and the potential in terms of are these sectors worth the risk? Are these sectors that we can truly invest in going forward? Yeah, no, I think, there's just looking at the agriculture space, right? I think there's a real desire with it throughout the continent, right, to really address food security. Africa last year imported $41 billion worth of food. That's an increase from 37 billion 2 years ago, and it's unfortunate when you recognize the potential of the agriculture industry here within the continent. So I think there are a lot of people looking to spur investments in particular sectors, understanding the need, but then understanding that there's a customer base here, right? You see the purchasing power of the continent growing, right, and a need for these services and goods. So I think people appreciate kind of the potential, and on the risk side, I think a lot of it, is manifested and can be addressed, right, through patience. I think, that's the one takeaway that I've gotten is from some of the industry leaders I've met with in my time here is patience is key to being successful. Yeah, patient capital. We have a lot of that here in Africa.
And that's why OPIC's a great partner, right? Because we are extremely patient capital, right? You are working side by side the U.S. government, and it's the best partner to have. In terms of, what you could begin to put in the pipeline, how soon could we see any of this beginning to manifest in terms of talks? What stage of talks are you at with, those you've spoken to? I'm all about action. So it's exciting that, that these discussions are happening, but I think what's important, the next steps, right, is ensuring that our potential customers and the current investors that we're talking to, right, get their financials and other kind of feasibility and studies that financial models, those are done properly, and then we work with our investment deal teams as they submit their applications and go through our diligence process. So OPIC moves as fast as our customers and clients need us to move, and so we are ready. Now, in your experience, and for Africa, you said Nigeria is your biggest exposure. One of our biggest. One of your biggest country exposures on the continent. What would you say is peculiar about the Nigerian market, doing business in Nigeria? I don't, there's nothing too peculiar, right? Nigeria, with being the largest economy, the population growth, right? I mean, it's a market where we see a lot of interest from multinational corporations and other investors to try to get into this market. I think what people are trying to get comfortable with is some of the regulatory issues, right? And then, better understanding kind of how, I think what's unique about Nigeria also is the relations at the federal level and the state level, right? And so, here in Lagos State, it's what, the 5th or 6th largest economy on the continent, right? And so understanding, where to house your investments, and what's also important too is understanding the need to have a local partner here.
But do you also engage with the government? I mean, the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, in terms of, as a foreign investor, we're bringing in money, and we would like some of those issues, like you mentioned, regulatory issues, to be addressed or just looked at.
Yeah, no, OPIC's clients are the private sector, so we work with the private sector, but obviously...
So they have to be the ones to initiate those conversations or those engagements?
Very much so, very much so. But throughout those discussions, government is a key interlocutor, right? I mean, they are aware of what we're doing. A lot of our focus is to support kind of broader U.S.-Africa foreign policy, right? So we want to ensure that our investments align with kind of U.S. foreign policy strategic goals, but then also the goals of African governments, right? Because this is a two-way street, and so it's always keeping them abreast and ensuring that they're aware of our activities.
Now, would you say that this has to maybe a good extent help push the U.S.? I know that for many countries, and I suppose also the U.S., trying to push more trade than aid for some of the countries that have been beneficiaries of U.S. aid over the years?
Of course, we recognize that our approach to development is through investment, not aid, and it is appreciating that the needs of the continent and the world writ large, right, cannot be addressed by one government, right? You need private sector along with you to actually transform economies and empower communities. And so, people fail to recognize that, the U.S. private sector is the largest foreign direct investor here in Africa, right? The UN's World Investment report that was issued last year, had U.S. investments tens of billions of dollars higher than any other country. And I think, mobilizing the private sector and having the private sector alongside us ensure that these deals are sustainable, right? And they're done correctly. And they have the longevity to actually really benefit and transform the communities. Okay,
great. Walker, we'll take a pause right now. We'll just take a short break and we'll be right back to pick it from where we left off. I've been speaking to Worku Gachou. He's the Managing Director for Africa at OPIC. If you're just joining us, Worku Gachou, Managing Director for Africa at OPIC, is with me today, and we're discussing the United States plans to deepen ties with Africa. Worku, thank you for your time so far.
Great, no.
Let's go into the U.S. Development Finance Corporation. It's new, but before we touch on that, just a quick note on your discussions here while you've been here in the country with financial institutions. One of them, Union Bank of Nigeria, there's a planned $200 facility. Could you just $200 million, I beg your pardon, facility. Could you just bring us up to speed? Tell us how that came about in the first place and where talks are at the moment.
Of course. So just taking a step back, that facility was originated through our 2X initiative. 2X stands for the 2 female chromosomes and the multiplier effect of investing in women. So our 2X initiative looks to help spur investment in women-owned, women-led, and women-benefiting enterprises. And we recognize that if you really want to transform communities, you have to support African women. And so our facility to Union Bank of Nigeria will support African women entrepreneurs and businesses here as they look to develop their businesses.
Okay. Let's go into the U.S. Development Finance Corporation. Development experts are calling it the biggest change in U.S. development policy in, 15 years? So I'm just wondering, why is this being established now?
No, I think it is one of the most exciting times in our agency's history. It significantly modernizes and expands the toolkit, recognizing that development finance is key to addressing some of the global challenges that are facing communities around the world. So What changes have kind of been underway include a consolidation of OPIC, the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, and certain functions of USAID that provide guarantees. And so all of that will be housed in the new Development Finance Corporation. And what's key is an increase of our lending cap. Our current lending cap is at $29 billion, and with the new DFC coming online, it will increase to $60 billion, allowing us to do significantly more investments in the markets we care about.
Sorry to butt in. So if I understand this correctly, because I was just wondering, because I was going to ask the question, what, I mean, the establishment of the DFC means for OPEC and the USAID, as we call it here. So it's all going to be under the DFC, that's OPEC and...
No, so just one office, one program within USAID called the Development Credit Authority. And so that office that provides guarantees, which are similar to kind of OPEC's products, will just be consolidated into one entity called the Development Finance Corporation. But yes, it's just that one office within USAID.
Okay, I mean, what about funding? And there's been talk about equity, the kind of instruments that the Finance Corporation would have to issue in terms of funding and how it's going to execute projects.
Yeah, so along with our increased lending cap, some of our policy changes and tools that we've been given by Congress include equity investments, right? So along with our debt financing, political risk insurance, and our fund of funds, we can now provide equity. An additional new tool we have is our ability to conduct feasibility and market assessment grants. One of the things we've recognized is that some of the difficulty in kind of generating pipeline and generating deal flow is the actual cost of the diligence and the feasibility work up front. So, by being able to fund this directly, that will hopefully open up a number of more projects that we could support. Okay.
When is this expected to take off?
So we are on track to establish the DFC October 1.
October 1 this year?
Of this year, yeah.
But would there, I mean, what I'm hearing is that the DFC might be under pressure to execute projects quickly, and that may not, maybe we may need a couple of months, probably to a year, before we could see some real solid projects. I don't know. What do you think?
We take our diligence very seriously, right? And so there are the talks that I've been having here in Lagos, right, are in preparation for the DFC, right? So we don't want to wait come October 1 for a flood of applications, right? We can begin to have these early discussions. These deals are extremely complex, right? And so having those discussions on the front end ensures that come October 1 we can hit the ground running and execute on these projects.
Now, how will the DFC change its investment strategy to focus more on low-income, middle-income countries?
That's a great question. Part of the change in the legislation has OPIC focusing its resources on supporting investments in low-income and lower middle-income countries. And what's exciting for me is that a concentration of those countries are here on the continent. And so it gives us great opportunity and great focus to ensure that our investments are driving growth throughout the continent.
I'm just wondering, what would those investments look like? What would the typical investment look like in those countries?
Our investments range from, they can go as low as $1 million or they can go as high as $350 million. So, I can give you examples. We supported a power plant in Togo with $150 million financing that has increased the energy capacity of that country threefold, right? That was a larger $150 investment. In Kenya, we provided a $5 million investment to Twiga, which is an innovative platform that connects smallholder farmers to distributors and groceries in the Nairobi capital. So we are completely flexible in the size and scope of our investments and then also the sectors in which we operate.
I'm just wondering, what is the big picture here? Because I know that ultimately, like we mentioned earlier, deepening trade with Africa and looking more on the trade side than, aid, as it were. So many, even some African countries have begun to say, you know what, we don't want aid anymore.
Of course.
We want to work with you as partners. We want to drive the private sector. We want you to bring your own private sector, bring your own companies here. We're seeing that happening, already, thankfully. So for you, I asked that question in the context of what China is doing here on the African continent. China is coming aggressively, and they're doing that by way of loans for critical infrastructure, which is key for so many African countries, especially the smaller ones, who are in dire need of cash, private cash for critical infrastructure. So just how that big picture fits into how trade is changing, not just globally, but for Africa, because Africa is about to create the biggest free trade market in the world, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, to trade more amongst them. It's for the countries to trade more amongst themselves. So I'm just wondering how that fits into the U.S.-Africa strategy, how you're trading with Africa, how Africa is going to create this market, and how other parties like China are also trading with the continent.
I think everyone's excited about the Africa Free Trade, the Continental Free Trade Agreement. That right there is an attraction to investors, right? The fact that you can bring a good into one market and have that have that move freely throughout a regional economic zone or the continent writ large is powerful. But I think where we differ in terms of other state-directed kind of financing, which is kind of China's approach, is that we bring the private sector alongside with us, right? And so that doesn't saddle the countries with debt, right? We've seen debt management really cripple a lot of nations, and so by bringing the private sector, by mobilizing the private sector and mitigating some of their risks, right? You see the projects we support be sustainable, right? We see it respect sovereignty in the countries in which we operate. We adhere to higher environmental and labor standards. So there are a number of real specific benefits to our private sector approach.
Now, there's also been talk about because of the way trade is changing on the global front. We've seen a number of trade deals or trade agreements being renegotiated. I was speaking to your colleague a few days ago, talking about how some European trade missions, trade teams have been to Africa, been to Nigeria to talk about new trade deals, or maybe just to renegotiate existing ones, and how, of course, Brexit too is also in the picture. When that is sorted, we might see, and how Africa may be in a different position now to make perhaps better deals, or just to renegotiate existing deals. What are your thoughts in terms of where Africa is now in its position to have better trade deals, not just with the U.S., with other trading partners, and how that could change trading for the continent?
I think trade is key. We are looking at one of our focuses through an initiative we have called Connect Africa at OPIC is actually looking at the transport and logistics sector, and why we're focusing on the sector is because the cost of movement of goods here on the continent is astronomical, right? In the U.S., the cost to move a good's about 6-7% of that good. Here on the continent, those costs rise up to nearly 70 to 80% of that item. So, OPIC investing in strategic infrastructure like roadways, ports of entry are we believe key in helping minimize the cost of movement of goods that can then further accelerate trade globally for the continent. Okay,
let's go back to those meetings you've had here so far in the country in terms of what happens next now. Yeah. You've brought those companies from US 33, I believe.
I believe
32,
so, yeah.
32, yeah. And so, I know that your job is still, the U.S., the Commerce Department to do the matchmaking, but I know that, you all work as a team at the end of the day to bring the private sector here from the U.S. and ensure that they do get, the best possible deals with companies here in Nigeria. But in terms of going forward, what we can expect to happen with these deals?
Yeah, no, it's, as we look forward, right, and look towards the implementation of the Development Finance Corporation and increased lending cap, what I'm hoping to see is an increase in our exposure and the number of investments we have on the continent also grow with our investment cap. So, ideally we have these discussions come to fruition. We begin the application and diligence process, and we're here, celebrating loan disbursements and investments. Okay.
Well, apart from Nigeria, what other countries do you have here? I know you do all over, but for perhaps 2019, what other countries would you be visiting?
So, we will be spending time in Mozambique next week. I think a lot of people are excited about the potential of that country. Also Ethiopia. I think a lot of people are excited about the reforms that Dr. Abiy has undertaken, and Ethiopia is a great potential in terms of its population size, strategic importance, and I think those are just examples of countries that we are excited for and actively looking to grow our pipeline in.
Okay, Worku, thank you for your time on the show today. We appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I've been speaking to Worku Gachou. He's the Managing Director for Africa at OPIC. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Remember, you can watch the show at 5 p.m. West African time daily and have access to all previous episodes of Beyond Markets on our website at CNBCAfrica.com. You can also stay engaged with the hashtag Beyond Markets, and you can follow my Twitter handle too at Esther O. Awani. For myself and the team, it's bye for now.